I am checking to see if we are now live. I'm refreshing the page here and seeing if we are actually broadcasting. I'm going to give it 30 seconds. Here we go. All right. Well, good evening. 18 minutes late. Sorry about that. And welcome to the SkyDrop News Network special broadcast. I've just had a great 18 minutes talking with Dan here, realizing that we weren't streaming. So that is on me, and so that's my fault. But anyways, good evening. My name is Pete, and otherwise known as Vapoc, and I'm going to be your moderator for tonight's session. Unlike previous Q&As that have been done, tonight's Q&A, other than being late, is brought to you by YouTube Live. And we'll be utilizing YouTube's Q&A feature during tonight's broadcast. Simply click the Q&A at the top of the chat to submit your questions, and also ask that you be respectful in the chat, and otherwise hope everyone enjoys this broadcast. Now, without further ado, I am very pleased to introduce the winner of Project Skydrop, newest brand ambassador of Adidas footwear, and expert meteorologist, Dan the Weatherman Leonard.
I guess we can jump right into it here.
We can jump right into it.
Yeah, I said a few words this afternoon in the video, but fire away at questions. I have a lot to talk about. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to get to everything tonight. There's a long and crazy story involved, but I'll at least be able to answer some of your questions.
Yeah, great. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in here. What was your initial thoughts when you found the trophy?
So when I found the trophy, okay, this is going way back. This is like the way back machine because I feel like that was a different lifetime. When I found it, it was sort of a culmination of like happiness and just a job done. I put a lot of time and effort into finding it, and I knew I was going up against some incredibly talented teams, professional level treasure hunters. Like this was no joke. And I knew I was running out the clock on how long I was going to be able to work on this. So I really only had that very small window on Tuesday afternoon to search for it. And I snuck out. I just made it as possibly as tight of a search area as I could, and I really narrowed it down to just one specific spot and just shot there and got it, and that was it. And I know a lot of people cried conspiracy right in the beginning because I wasn't all crazy about it, but I think at the end of the day, it was like one of those things like when you win, you do it and you're like, yes, I did it, and like let's just finish this off, go home and celebrate. And little did I know that the craziness was only just beginning, and that was just the very start of this wild journey. But at the time, it was just like it was a combination of just happiness and just proud that I did the job that I set out to do. So yeah.
So one of the questions that we had in our starting that nobody apparently got to hear was, we know that you used meteorology to find the trophy, or the area at least. What got you into meteorology?
So a lot of my buddies, they have stories about like crazy weather events that they saw when they were, young age and impressionable, where it was like, oh, I saw a tornado, oh, the blizzard or the hurricane. For me, it was more the storm that didn't happen. It was a Sunday night. This is a fateful night back in the 1980s, kind of dating myself here, but I went to bed and the local TV meteorologist had been proclaiming big blizzard the next day. When I woke up, it was supposed to be 16 inches of snow on the ground, blowing, drifting, craziness. And I was so excited. Number one, because I love snow. Number two, because it was going to be a snow day and I was going to miss school and get to play in the snow all day. I woke up that morning, the Monday morning, tore open the blinds and look outside, nothing, not even a flake. And I was like, okay, there's a mistake. Maybe the storm is delayed. So I run downstairs, turn on the TV real quick, and it's local meteorologists explaining how the storm is moving further out to sea now, and there won't be much, if any, snow today. And I literally cried all the way to the bus stop that morning because I wasn't supposed to be going to school. I didn't do any of my homework. And it was a real defining moment, I guess, for my career because I basically determined right then and there that I was going to grow up and be the weatherman that was never wrong, so that little kids like me would never have to be disappointed again like that. And yeah, I fulfilled my promises. Unfortunately, I'm still wrong every now and then, but at least I became a meteorologist like I had always intended. So that's my story behind that.
That's amazing. So the next question that we had was, what was some of the initial thoughts when you saw CJ grab the bounty? What was that for you?
It was devastating, as you can imagine. So the everything that happened that day leading up to that evening was just sort of craziness. Um, I knew, we pretty much knew that Chris was going to get the bounty that night. At least I had a really good feeling that it was going to happen, just because of the way things had gone on during the day. And ironically, my wife and I solved the cipher right around 9 p.m. And my initial reaction, very first reaction is grab my jacket and let's go. Like I am out the door. And she stopped me. She says, "Don't do it. It's too dangerous. Like you don't know you got an hour and a half drive up there. You don't know what can happen in the middle of the night in the woods with $87,000 worth of gold on the line." And I kind of stopped and said, "Yeah, it's not worth it. Like, whatever happens here, it's if anything happened in the woods, somebody, brought a really big knife with them. Who the heck knows what would have happened?" And so basically, we just made the decision I would sit there and just hope for the best. I still kind of hoped that he wasn't going to get it that night and maybe wait until the next day, in which case I would have a chance to get up there. But I had a pretty good feeling that he was going to do it that night. So, my wife and I were sitting at home, watching the webcam and hoping for the best and expecting the worst. And yeah, we got the worst. So it's a crushing feeling. I mean, it was like, you know, it's gut-wrenching because not only do you lose out on the money and my son's college fund, but somebody you thought was your friend turned out to not be, and that was probably the hardest part of the whole thing. Just watching him on the webcam taking my son's money. It was just like it was tough. It was really tough. Obviously, I didn't sleep that night, but it's until you've ever been in a situation like that, it's you don't really expect what you're gonna feel, but the feeling was super real. And I just want to make it clear now that, Chris and I are on much better terms. I think I really believe he's genuine in his apology, and he feels he did wrong. And that goes a long way to helping everybody heal, I think. But yeah, at the time it was really, really tough.
And
So.
only imagine. So, you know, you get the trophy, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what the next step is. What were your thoughts when you first saw the initial bounty puzzle?
Oh, when I first saw the puzzle, that's what sort of led to my downfall, I guess. When the puzzle came out, it was nighttime. I was completely exhausted. I'd been stupidly searching this forest in Western Mass for whatever reason. I was kind of convinced that it was out there. Turned out it wasn't, but here I am in this, rundown motel room out in the Berkshires, and I'm exhausted. And then the puzzle comes out, and it's like it was just too much. And I looked at it and I just saw a bunch of words and numbers and symbols, and I was just like, I don't have time to do this right now. Like I should be home with my son. I should be doing work. Like this was like an completely overwhelming moment for me. And it was at that point I said, I gotta trust somebody and hope that they can help me with this. And I know a lot of people had been offering help up until that point. But it's one of those things. It's like, who do you trust? Do you trust faceless internet people who are, messaging you saying, "Hey, I can help you with this," or do you trust the people that you vetted and they're semi-public figures, and you think, okay, these guys have a lot to lose if they're not in it to just help me. And that's the reason I chose them pretty much at that moment because it was like this is do or die. I'm getting word of the Discord. Oh, these guys solved this part of the cipher already. Oh, wow, these guys are making incredible progress. And here I am thinking, oh my God, like if we don't act now, like somebody could figure this out even without my passphrase and it will be all over. So we got to move now. And that was sort of the feeling I had that night, and that was probably the lowest point where I was just like in sort of desperation mode. The days following got a little better because I sort of realized that like, okay, the time crunch isn't that crazy. Um, these guys could theoretically do it, but it doesn't seem like they're gonna do it immediately. So I had time to breathe, but sort of in that moment when I first saw the puzzle, it was like, oh man, this is real.
So moving on to our next question. Did you forget to film finding the treasure upon picking it up because of the excitement of the moment? Or had you not actually read the FAQ?
I read the FAQ, but it was so long ago, and I was obviously that was a mistake. Um, but I think at the time it never even dawned on me when you're looking for it, and you guys saw what it was like when I sort of almost tripped over the thing, and I'm still looking at the log thinking, is this it? I don't know. And then I kind of come upon it, and it's one of those things where just instinct takes over. Like I didn't stop and think, okay, what are all the rules that I need to follow? No, maybe I should check the website's frequently asked question page to make sure I'm doing everything properly. It was more like, oh my God, there it is, rabbit, and let's get out of here and call it a day. That was sort of my feeling. So yeah, I think in the back of my mind, I knew I was supposed to do that video, but I also remember reading it, initially when I first read the rules and thinking, oh, that like, okay, I'll worry about that when the time comes. It's like you never think you're going to be the one. So you're just reading sort of the general rules that like, the winner is the one that picks up the trophy. And the person that gets the trophy also gets the bounty. I'm like, okay, that's simple. Like what other rules would I even need to worry about? At the end of the day, we know why Jason and Tom put that rule in. It was to prevent any kind of controversy at the site. So, even after the fact, when everybody's like, "Hey, you didn't follow that rule," and I just thought, well, like that rule wasn't really applicable in my case. There was nobody like fighting me for it. I mean, there was nobody within a mile of me at the time. So there was never any controversy in that respect. So I never really worried about it. But it's one of those things, Jason and Tom are kind of quirky, and I thought like, okay, maybe this is like a true real life video game where I didn't unlock that step, so I have to unlock that step. That's why I videoed myself doing it all along. But in the end, yeah, it wasn't a conscious decision to do it or not do it. I just wasn't really thinking about it at the time. That's really what it comes down to.
So next question is from Jeremy. Any plans to go to the Nevada GPS on the trophy to see if the game is buried there?
I I think I've had enough adventures for 1 year. I mean, I imagine there's got to be somebody closer out there that can actually drive to that spot. Seems pretty remote to me. But it's funny that, when you solve the cipher and you plug in those coordinates and it pops up on the map, and those were the two mountains I was looking for. Um, the mountains just pop right out, and it's like, oh my, that's so obvious. That's so obvious. But I had spent the better part of like the 3 or 4 days trying to guess what that mysterious riddle was all about. And this is kind of a side note, but I thought when they were referring to NV that Nevada was just they kept saying NV, and I thought, okay, maybe they're not referring to Nevada there. Everybody assumes it's Nevada, but maybe it's not Nevada. Maybe it's somewhere closer to my home, and I thought Newtonville because I live sort of near Newtonville. And there's two cemeteries there that begin with a mount, and one was Mount Benedict, who was the trader, and one was Mount Feek, which was a goldsmith. And I thought, wow, what a clever riddle, because everybody's looking for two mountains in Nevada, but in reality, might have been two mounts in next to Newtonville, near Newtonville. So I thought that was a really kind of clever solution, and that sidetracked me for a long time on the quest. That's why I was kind of mystified because, I thought that's the kind of riddle that Tom and Jason would totally come up with, and in the end, it was completely wrong. But when I told them, they were like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense," and I said, "Yeah, see, like, but at the end of the day, to answer your question, no, I will not be going to Nevada anytime soon. But you guys are welcome to try to get out there and figure out what's going on. Bring your shovel. Yeah, good luck with that.
So, prior to Project Skydrop, like, do you consider yourself a treasure hunter? Is this the first time you've kind of gotten into this? Like, what's your experience with that?
I've never even considered the idea. It's funny. When I was a kid, there was this game called Sid Meier's Pirates. Again, this is way back. Most of you are probably like, "What are you talking about?"
Sid Meier's also made the Civilization game.
Yeah, which
Yep.
I loved too. But in the pirate games, you were supposed to, go around, sail your ship around the Caribbean, plundering villages and stuff. But all I really cared about is going into the taverns and finding the seedy old man in the corner who will sell you a treasure map. And that's what I made the game. And I would get the treasure map and look and sail around the Caribbean looking for an island that looked kind of similar to this treasure map, and maybe I could find some treasure. So I guess from an early age, I was sort of always interested in it. But like when you're an adult, you're like, okay, that's fun, but it's not real. Um, but when I saw the Project Skydrop, I had the same feeling like, okay, this is fun, but it's not for me, obviously. Like there's real professional treasure hunters out there that are, geolocators, whatever they're called, that are going to be way better at this. But then when I saw how the setup was, and the two major variables, sunshine and temperature, were the only sort of factors that changed over time. I thought, actually, I might have a chance at this. I'd be competing against other meteorologists or other people that are really savvy about weather. Um, but somebody is going to solve this who really understands weather and meteorology. And yeah, that was true. A lot of people got in contact with me after the fact and said, "Oh, I'm not a meteorologist, but I study weather and everything." And I was right onto it. I had it in your area too. I was really close, really close. So yeah, it was. I think it was, early on. I figured out that, I might have a chance just because of my profession. And ordinarily I would never even give it a moment's thought. Like that the owl one in France or whatever, where you have to solve all the riddles to find it. Like, yeah, that's not me. Whether I ever do another hunt again, I don't know. That's if it had some weather element to it, sure, I'll give it a shot.
So, next question, moving on, is Dan, what was the final split of the bounty, if any, and how did you and CJ come to that decision?
No split. He just gave it back. No questions asked. Um, it's interesting because, I think it was one of those things where he just sort of had an epiphany and he was just like, I'm giving this all back. And I think I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think at the end of the day, he didn't feel good about it. He told me several times that, he couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat, his heart was racing all the time. And the only way to remedy that is to just make me whole, give it all back. Um, so, at the end of the day, he doesn't get anything, but I think it probably makes him feel better about it. So yeah, it's interesting how it all worked out, but to get it off his conscience, I think like that probably feels way better than any kind of settlement we could have had in the end. where both sides would have left unhappy. Let's say we split it 50-50 or something. You know, I would have been unhappy. He probably would have been unhappy and felt guilty still. And I think this was the only resolution that we could have had that made any sense in the end. So.
Next question is, did you listen to CJ's Q&A? And if so, what was your favorite question?
First of all, I didn't watch it. A lot of you were sort of feeding me, the tidbits, the most relevant tidbits of it. I couldn't bring myself to watch it. I was still really upset at that point. I was really upset at him. I was upset at the situation, and I just wanted to figure out, what I could possibly do to work a resolution. And I realized after that Q&A that I think it was after that and what everybody had told me, some of those questions. And thank you for everybody who was sort of defending me on that one, because I think it really helped my psychological state at that point. Um, but I think it was at that point I realized, like, okay, I think we'll have a break for Chris here, because it seems like, you know, if he was really interested in burning me, he wouldn't have done that Q&A. He would have just disappeared into the darkness, and I never would have heard from him again. And there probably would have been lawsuits, and it would have been terrible, and everybody would have just been totally miserable, including the devs. And I think it was probably after that he realized that yeah, the jig was up. And I sort of felt a little bit better about it when he was doing it at the time, when you guys were peppering him with questions. That yeah, maybe this could lead to eventually a good resolution. So.
Did you ever feel like the creators, Jason and Tom, were trying to steal your thunder?
uh no, no. I think they're clever, they're smart, they're obviously sort of, they're not geniuses, they're borderline. The way they handled everything was very um, it was to maximize the amount of attention and excitement around everything. You can almost, I almost think of it as like sort of like a Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory scenario, where Gene Wilder's just kind of like, oh, it's getting good, it's getting good. And of course, I'm the patsy in this whole thing. I'm just playing along. I remember in that first video, I sort of said that I didn't feel like I was in control of my own narrative, which is a really weird feeling. And I felt like that all the way until the end. Um, but at the same time, I think they wanted to see how it all played out. They wanted to maximize the drama, which is kind of good for the story, good for everybody, except me, of course. But yeah, I was never in this for any thunder. Like I didn't want the attention. That was never my goal in the first place. I was in it for the thrill of the hunt. So I was sort of like an unwilling participant in this whole thing. So like if they wanted all the thunder, okay, fine, sure. But then when I realized how many people were rallying behind me, it's like, okay, well, like I got a good crew of people here that want to see me win this at the end, and it's such a strange dynamic. Everything was such a weird dynamic in the end. Maybe I'll be able to tell the whole story fully, but just so many weird twists and turns, and yeah, the game designers being the way they were, it made it that much more intriguing. So.
So, for the audience out there, prior to us going live, we had actually talked with Dan for about 18 minutes. I had actually talked to Dan for about 18 minutes, not realizing we weren't live. We had originally discussed kind of trying to keep this to about 30 minutes. We'd probably try to go over to like maybe 45 minutes. We're very close to that time. Dan, I do want to let you know there's about 30 questions in this list. I'm gonna
Oh
try to
man.
scan a few of these, but I'm gonna try to pick out a few that either we hit during that first part that I don't think we've covered, or that I feel like could really be interesting for the community here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll try to go a few more here.
Okay.
So the next one is Dan, and I think this is you answered this in our previous. would you consider giving back a bit, as you mentioned in your video, or start a new hunt with Project Skydrop and start a new hunt with Project Skydrop participants?
It's possible. I want to give back to everybody once Diego gets his cut. I think I'm going to give back in some shape or form. I want to do, donations to, some like maybe outreach programs, um, conservation programs, things like that. And then maybe, if there's enough left over, we do like a little extension of this. Obviously not at Project Skydrop Part 2 level stuff, but maybe it's, um, we do a little something for everybody. I know a lot of people that were working on this, that were in the hunt from the beginning. I sort of call them the ground troops. They were never really sort of savvy enough to have any sort of computer knowledge to be able to deduce weather and satellite data and stuff like that, and or rent out a Cessna and fly it and take high resolution photos. Um, this particular group, just they were just brute forcing it, hiking through the woods, hoping for the best. And there's something to be said. They probably didn't have any chance at all. But there's something to be said for that, and I want to sort of recognize that. So maybe my part in this, if I choose to do another hunt, will sort of give those folks the advantage where there's no clues, nothing like that. I just say like the treasure's out there, go find it. It's on a trail somewhere. Um, so maybe I would like to do something like that, sort of reward people for actually getting out and getting some fresh air and walking. I mean, I think if it's one thing we can all agree on is that we all kind of spend too much time death scrolling on our phones, including kids. So if we can even like give them a little bit of reason to get up off the couch on that Saturday afternoon and go for a hike because there might be some treasure on the way. Yeah, it's possible. So I'll keep you updated. Haven't really worked out all the details yet, but it's a possibility.
Great. So, going back to the bounty question, you'd mentioned that Chris had given it all 100% back to you. Next question is, was there any gold given back to CJ after he turned over the bounty?
No, nope. He
Okay.
doesn't. He didn't get a dime of it.
Fast
That was
question
our
right there.
Yeah, that was our agreement right from the beginning. Like you don't get any of it. So, yeah. Now whether or not I change my mind at some future point and I'm like, okay, Chris is really a good guy. He deserves something. I don't know. But no, he doesn't get any of it at this point.
I'm going to combine the next two questions. There's actually two questions I'm going to combine. In the lead up to finding the trophy, what were some of the weather apps and tools that you had been using that somebody else should have been using in order to beat you? And then what was the final data point that led you to the treasure site area?
Um, so a lot of people were using weather at this point to try to solve it. I wasn't alone, obviously, but I think there was one sort of key moment where I found a high resolution satellite image. You get the GOES geostationary orbits, which take 5 minute photos, but those aren't high resolution enough to really pinpoint it. And there's other satellites that operate on their geosynchronous, so you only get one shot per day. But it just happened to line up on a day where it was cloudy, and there was one little break of sun that came through on one of the webcam images, and it just so happened that this high resolution shot came through about 10 minutes before that sunny webcam image. So I was really able to narrow it down because I saw the break was pretty much right over Greenfield and Irving area. And so basically I extrapolated. I knew the clouds were moving east southeast. I extrapolated it across and said, okay, it's got to be in northern Wendell State Forest. This is it. And that was on like Sunday that I had pretty much determined that it was in Wendell. I just didn't get a chance to go out there until Tuesday, which is kind of crazy. So, I mean, if I had a lot of time, I probably could have gone out on Sunday and looked for it. And that would have really driven people nuts that I found it that soon. But yeah, it was probably that. high resolution satellite shot that sort of changed the course of things for me.
Nice. So you find the trophy, you come out of the forest. Who were the people filming you once you grabbed the trophy coming out?
So I refer to them as the Fliss Market crew in the beginning because that's sort of where they were staged. But it wasn't the owners. John and Liz were actually really cool, and their market is
I
awesome
see your
if you're
shirt,
ever
by the
out
way,
there.
you're wearing.
Yeah, I actually bought a shirt for a souvenir. It was actually some of the other folks. I don't know their names, but they were the ones peppering me with questions, and they were taking the photographs. So I'm not sure how it all went down, who did what. It's water under the bridge now, but it was I think at that moment. Of course, at the time I'm riding high, and I'm like, oh wow, these people are here to greet me. They're like celebrating, cheering. And I get up to him and I'm just kind of waving the thing around, hey, and they're taking pictures. And of course, that was sort of the beginning of this whole saga. And I think, wow, things would have been way different if I just kept the trophy in my backpack and just got in my car and left. It would have been, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you guys right now. It would have been way less dramatic. So yeah, that was sort of the crazy moment that started it all. So
So I'm going to paraphrase a whole bunch of questions here that are actually very much in the same vein. It seems like people are really interested to kind of hear about some of the events that unfolded between the bounty puzzle being released to you, bounty puzzle being released to the Discord members, and then some of the lead up in like what were some of the messagings that you were getting from Jason and Tom, and was there any? Did you ever feel like that they were not being honest with you?
no, I felt like they were always honest with me. I felt like they're walking a fine line though between wanting and almost needing me to win and trying to keep the game fair and keeping the interest going in it. And that was sort of like a really stressful point because, obviously I felt at this point that the bounty was rightfully mine, and I didn't even want to be playing this second part of the game in the first place because when I confronted them about that, they said, no, you didn't think we were going to show up on your doorstep with an Ed McMahon check, did you? And it's like, well, kind of. I don't know. Um, but so I kind of unwittingly, played the second part, and it's just like I don't really have time for this, and but I'm like, okay, I'll go along with it. But I kind of wanted reassurance from them that if they're gonna do this, like I want to have like a big enough advantage where if I can't work on this for a couple days because I got too much going on at home, that I'm not gonna feel like um, there's a potential that I'm going to lose this. But that's sort of exactly how I felt through most of it, which was I don't know if this game is rigged in my favor enough. I feel like this is anybody's game, and it was like a tough feeling. So yeah, I think it was as far as game theory goes, it was really kind of bizarre. Um, and to Jason and Tom's credit, they didn't really help me out much. I would email them and with questions, and they wouldn't respond. Like I was sort of on my own on this one, which I felt at times like, wow, they really don't want to help me. They don't want to give the impression that, they're just gonna let me win and I was gonna have to work for it. So that's the feeling that I had through the whole thing.
So, we all saw that the images when the bounty jar got taken. A surprise to us. I guess it was probably a surprise to you. Speaking about Jason and Tom, what was some of their reaction and like the conversations after the jar had been taken with you?
Um, well, I had emailed them earlier, in the evening before it was even taken, saying that I was going, but I was afraid there was a traitor. Um, and then I emailed them back and said I wasn't going because I was going to wait till the morning. And then after the jar was taken, I emailed them the coordinates just to show that I had already solved it, just for the record. Um, so, that was. that was it for interaction. They didn't respond to any of those emails, and I didn't even have an interaction with them until the next day, when they were trying to figure. They still hadn't figured out what was going on. They thought it still might have been like some sort of a prank that I was playing, or that maybe Chris was in on the prank and it was just all kind of a ruse. It was going to be like this game where Chris pretended to take it, and like I was going to get mad, and then Chris was going to say, "Oh no, we're just kidding. Here it is." So they didn't know what was going on. It was kind of like a kind of like a weird thing. But yeah, I really didn't have much interaction with him at all, that night during when the bounty was taken.
And then in terms of the reconciliation and kind of the lead up to today's events that we got to see on Discord, what were some of the roles that Jason, Tom, or and I got named Vapoc were in these in this?
So we've been talking for the past couple days that let's make this right. Chris basically came clean and said, "Take it all, it's yours." So we wanted to do it in a way that I felt was um, authentic. And Chris and I, when when we were on the hunt, and there was a lot of times, we were together and we would joke about what's going to happen when we find it. My intention was always that I wanted my son to be in on the action. I was gonna have him go and pick it up, and I was gonna let Chris, live stream it while Diego picked up the treasure. And that kind of like fantasy I guess got sort of stuck in my head. And then so when we were talking about like how do you want to do this, I think that was still alive. Like I said, I just want everything to go back to the way it should be. Like it should have been. It should have been my son picking up that jar, Chris maybe off to the side recording it, and my son playing with the gold or whatever, and it would have been a fun little thing for him, when he's older. I can say, "Hey son, remember that time that dad got your," and he says, "Yeah, yeah, dad, I've heard that life story about 100 times already. Well, let's watch the video again." That was kind of the idea behind the whole thing. And I know like it kind of looks staged because it was staged. I mean, um but I think at the end of the day, I wanted it to be for him, and that's sort of the reason why we did it. And Tom and Jason, originally they might have been there to broker the whole exchange and everything, and they kind of stepped back and said, like, "Look, guys, this is between you two. This is an honor thing between you guys. You should just do it. We'll just stay hands off on this, and you work it out between the two of you." So they were good faith brokers through the whole thing. They kind of helped us both out and reached a resolution that I think everybody was happy with. So at the end of the day, they weren't there for the final exchange, which I think in a lot of ways was good. It was just me and Chris. So.
Great. Let's see here. So moving on to the next question. How long before you went to Wendell did you have the location narrowed down?
Um, I had it narrowed down on Sunday, like I said, which I know a lot of you guys are gonna be like, it's crazy. But to me, I had already done it, and I knew every day that I waited was getting risky because that circle was getting smaller, and I knew people were gonna start to get forced into Wendell. So I knew I had to strike while the iron was hot. And the irony is that I had my real weather job to go to. And I was going to be really busy the next few days. So if it wasn't Tuesday after work, after my shift was over, it was not going to be at all. I probably would have handed off my maps to a coworker who had volunteered because he had the day off on Wednesday. But chances are somebody else would have got it by then anyway. Um, I think the real breakthrough for me was when I got to um, the state forest, and I parked, and instead of just barreling into the woods like I wanted to and just brute forcing all my circled spots, I sort of studied the clouds, how they were moving against the hill and how it corresponded to the webcam. And there were a couple webcam shots where it was, I was in a sunny spot where I was in Irving, Um, and then on the webcam it was cloudy, so I would kind of look up and say, okay, this cloud's over here on that side of the hill, but this side of the hill is clear, so it's more likely over here, so I can eliminate these areas here. And I sort of did like a little bit of last minute homework to narrow down the search even more. So I think at the end of the day, it was I had it narrowed down like really, really good. I only had 2 hours to play with, so when I bolted in there, I said, this is my best shot that I can do in the time that I'm allotted. So that's how it went down.
So we're getting close to our time. I've picked out two more questions from this list, and then we'll say any kind of parting thoughts. So the first one is uh, many of us learned new skills during Project Skydrop. What is something that you learned, if anything, during this hunt?
I mean, I've learned so much. Like it was a life lessons, honestly. The whole who you can trust, who you can't trust, partnerships, the wheeling and dealing. That's all life lessons. I don't know. I don't want this whole experience to turn me into some sort of cynic and be skeptical about anybody that would ever try to befriend me. Like, okay, you must have an ulterior motive here if you're just buying me a beer. What's going on? So yeah, I hope I don't turn more sour in that respect. Um, but yeah, it's a lot of game theory too, I guess I wasn't really expecting it, which made it that much crazier. You see those reality shows where this kind of thing is a setup and everybody goes into it, forming alliances and backstabbing, but you're kind of the premise of the game already, so you're aware that this kind of thing is going to happen. But when you're in the situation where you don't expect it to happen, that's completely different. So I think that's what I think my guard will be up, obviously, a little more in the future. But I'll always remember the mistakes I made. Those will be so glaring. Um, you know, I still think about it every now and then. Oh, if I just played, that first confrontation a little bit differently, things would have been so different. Or, oh, if I had just, trusted these people and let them help me for free, then it would have been so different. Um, you know, um, I'm always gonna go back and look on things that I could have done differently, but I don't think it will change me significantly one way or another in the long run, if that answers the question.
Nice. So last question, and maybe I'll slide another one. But any shout outs or people that you want to acknowledge?
Yes, but I will wait on that actually. If we do a meet and greet, like a meetup with the artifact, which I think will be cool, then I'll definitely give some shout outs at that point. Because I think that, there's a lot of people that deserve it. Like they helped me a lot through this whole thing. So, I don't want to, name names now because I'm sure I'm gonna forget one person and I'll be like, oh, I forgot Joe, and like that he might feel slighted. So, yes, I will eventually acknowledge those that were really helpful to me. So.
So in closing, are there any parting thoughts that you want to give? And one of the last questions here was kind of what's the family's experience, and like, would you do this again?
Honestly, I don't think so. Um, Maybe with time I'll look back on it in a different light, but right now we're all kind of exhausted and we just want to sort of go back to a sense of normalcy. I've got a lot of work to do, a lot of backlog stuff. Um, but and at the end of the day, I still, even now, after everything that happened, I still look back at it as like a really fun experience. Plus, I made a lot of like new friends, like all you guys too. Everybody on Team Dan, like that was like so cool to get, so many people behind you. That's a cool feeling. Never really had that before, which is kind of amazing. So I'll always have that. And I guess at the end of the day, this is always just going to be like an experience I look back on and I'm like, that was pretty crazy. But I'll probably just move on with life. And if there's a new treasure hunt that pops up on my news feed someday, I'm just like, Huh, I remember that time I won one of those. But whether I do it again, I don't know. Probably not. Probably not.
Well, Dan, I tell you, this has been a pleasure. I'm sorry that we went over your time and the mess up in the beginning, but this has been a pleasure. I think that a lot of the community members have probably gotten closure and gotten to ask a lot of questions. There's a lot more questions that people wanted to ask, and I think over time, I think some of those questions will probably come out. But really appreciate you jumping on here, talking to the community, and looking forward to that party.
Yeah, me too. That'll be fun, I think. It'll be a good time.
And this is going to be an inside joke, Dan, but just to help complete some of the bingo cards, I want to make sure we throw a shout out to Treasure Buddy, if he's in the audience. Please, thank you for joining Treasure Buddy, and for the drinking game, Treasure Buddy. So there we go.
Okay.
Have a great night, everybody. This is Vapok signing off. See y'all tomorrow.